2010. Today we have a meeting that is different from the 6 previous meetings we've had. The first meeting in December was a foundational hearing, an introductory hearing, and the 5 subsequent hearings were focused needs assessments, each on a specific item, focusing on what might be through testimony, public testimony, stakeholder input, and public response, focusing on what might be the requirements of the people in the state of California for the master plan for higher education and for higher education in general in order to ensure economic prosperity, good quality of life, social cohesion, and other necessary public goods over the coming decades, just as the master plan, I believe, and has been so responsible for the success of California in the previous 5 decades. Today's meeting will not have expert testimony. It will at the end have public comment. But today's meeting is being held so that the members of the committee can express their thoughts on what the established and revealed needs are for higher education as expressed through those, especially through the 5 most previous hearings. To facilitate that discussion, Co-Chair Negrete McLeod and I have developed a draft document entitled Draft Public Agenda for Public Higher Education in California, Appreciating Our Past, Ensuring Our Future. And in it, we have outlined as a point of departure for discussion a draft of what we've set down as the needs that we feel have been revealed through the first 5 needs assessment hearings. The document is divided into an overarching policy need, and then needs related to access, relating to affordability and financial aid, relating to accountability, relating to coordination and articulation, relating to finance, and a comment on moving forward from here. It has been the intent of my co-chair and myself, and was agreed upon in one previous hearing by the committee, that what we do is that we first try to reach consensus on a general needs assessment, a general public agenda as to what the needs are. And then, if the committee so wishes, we could then embark, having hopefully reached consensus on that, we could then embark on a separate effort within this committee, but a separate effort to delineate the options for reaching those needs and perhaps reaching consensus on some options, specific options for reaching those needs. With that in mind, knowing the busy schedule that our committee has, I think that what we will do is, as members come here, we will take their comments on the draft document. Before we do that, I want to do 2 things. One, I want to introduce and welcome to the hearing room the graduate students from the Graduate Education Public Policy Program at Loyola Marymount University. Thank you for coming here. Welcome to the Capitol. We know we've provided you right, you're standing to take the oath, and thank you. Welcome, and we're happy that we could provide you with a meeting room across the street where you can conduct your business. We wish you a productive day, and thank you for your interest in our committee hearing and for the work you do in education, higher education. With that, I would want to introduce my co-chair, Senator Gloria Negrete McLeod, for opening comments as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I have to give kudos. While I have sat as the co-chair, it has been my co-chair's aim to do this and make sure that we look at everything in the master plan, and I really, really want to thank him for his vision and allowing me to serve as the co-chair on this committee. Has given us a view of what it is that we're looking for. And the only thing that troubled me a little bit when we looked at the many things is that everybody had good points, but one of the overarching points that everybody seemed to make was we need more money. And while I understand we do need more money, we have to kind of look at, especially in the situation that we've been in the last, I think since I've been here, 10 years, for the lack of money. So we have to learn how to do things better. Money is always very, very helpful. But I really do think that we have to look at how we utilize what we have to make it better for the state of California and the students. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your kind words. It's really been a pleasure working on this committee with you, and I want to thank all the members of the committee who have shared our view of the importance of higher education and who have been here through the hearings and worked with all of us to work toward a consensus on what the needs are. Thank you very much. And with that, I think that you've all seen...
Let's go with those that came in early.
Right.
Mr. Cook and
I presume you've all seen the draft document, which serves as a point of departure for discussion. And then I think what we'll do, without objection, since we can never count on having everyone here at the same time, we'll just begin taking commentary from people as they came in. I'll ask for commentary in the order in which people arrived. Presumably everyone's busy and some have to leave. And then if any of you have questions about what the options are of this committee, what we can do with this committee, what our options are, I'll be happy to answer those options. Assemblymember Cook, you were the first to arrive. I know you would like to make some comments. And we can do this, and I think rather than go through the document section by section and ask for comments on each section, since we can't tell how long we can hold members in the committee, I'll just ask for everyone's general comments on what items they wish to make comments on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you're right. I better get to the point or I won't have anyone here to listen to me, I guess. It's a busy day. First of all, I want to commend the co-chairs for having this hearing and your expressed objectives. I think everyone agrees that the one common denominator is how important higher education is in California and that we're in a crisis mode. We've examined that. You've heard the same themes over and over in the testimony that was given. You know, I have said before that it's kind of difficult for me because I'm not sure whether I'm speaking as somebody that has gone through the 3 different venues of the California higher education system, or somebody that was teaching in one of the 3 venues. And sometimes I think at the level down at the Academic Senate, where we talk about some of these issues, we never get to a consensus. It just seems we talk, and by the way, I am delighted that many of these issues were brought forward, particularly the issue of articulation. We have not done a very, very good job. And I think, you know, a lot of these issues, we're going to attempt to solve them, and that is one issue we've got to put to bed because it gets so cumbersome to transfer credits and what have you. It's very, very frustrating. And one of my goals when I came into this committee was to make sure that we do not lose any more students. From that first day, somebody that's teaching there, and I said this over and over again, you have a challenge, and that is that you got to make sure that you get rid of all these other distractions and what have you, and have them focus so that they can complete that degree. And I think that is, pardon the pun, certainly been articulated. So I hope that we can go forward with the more reform on articulation, make it easier, make sure that we're all the institutions are on the same page. I think that's extremely important. I think our accountability, not just in terms of fiscal issues, but the programs, the courses, the curriculum that we offer. If it's meaningless, if it doesn't serve the needs of the population of any of the schools that we're talking about, and there's so many different ways, then I think it's got to certainly be reanalyzed and maybe jettisoned. Some of the other things about students, over and over again, I feel very, very strongly about the recruiting. It's very, very difficult financially, but I am a big supporter of private partner, public-private partnerships that reflect the needs of the community, where certain businesses or certain areas want certain courses so that they can fit that needs. I know Marty is very active with community colleges going for the 4-year degree, which I am supportive of. Nursing education, we've got to look at all those things that, going there have been the particular area of either UC or Cal State. I think we've got to look at everything right now, because our goal is to get not only more students into classrooms, but to keep them there. Our dropout rate is just atrocious. And
if I might, just for the process of the committee, what I think, I'll proceed in whichever way the committee as a whole wishes to, but what might be most efficacious for us is if members could, as well as giving any general thoughts that you have, respond to the draft document, because it is the hope of the committee, as was expressed by the committee, to provide a generalized needs-based assessment of public education as a general document. A second task can and could be to then decide what means we employ to reach those needs. But the committee had agreed at an earlier time that the first task would be to see if we could reach an assessment, reach a consensus on what the general needs are for higher education. A second step being that we could then decide what options could be what specific, we're getting down in the weeds, what specific options. So I'm wondering if committee members can address their comments to things in the draft document that they either support or take issue with or would like to alter, rather than general comments.
Well, I apologize. I thought I was doing that. Maybe I was doing that too much. The overall document, I'm very, very supportive of. I was going point by point on a lot of the different things, and yeah, I was probably getting down on how to do this. But once again, at least from my personal standpoint, I was trying to underscore those things that were relative to my background and what I heard through this committee process. I think we're going to have a lot of different opinions, but I think you're also going to see a lot of common denominators from the speakers, and maybe I'm incorrect, but I've talked quite a bit now, and I'll be more than happy
Well,
to
I'm
pass
just wondering, were there things that you would like to see, albeit hopefully keeping the nature of the document as an overall overarching draft, were there things you would like to see inserted into it? Were there...
No, I think right now, with your explanation of the fact that maybe the implementation phase, for lack of a better term, might come later, the fact that you have listed the major touch points that we should get a consensus on and then go forward later on how we're going to carry those out.
And we can do that. Later on can be immediately. I don't mean today, but later on can be the following meeting. So,
okay.
yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you,
Senator Liu.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ruskin and Senator Grady McLeod. I too want to thank both of you for co-chairing this this meeting. I do have some comments here regarding what has gone on. I received the PPIC higher education in California, I think, up on my desk on yesterday, and had an opportunity to go through it last night. And I thought it hit on most of what we were talking about over the last 6 months, and yet it better articulated some of the points that perhaps could be included in a final resolution if we all can agree to things. Most of all, I think what has gone on here regarding the master plan is that we have reaffirmed the master plan, unlike a conversation between Mr. Block and Mr. Cook. My understanding, I guess hitting up against the wall regarding the master plan dealt with professional degrees. And I can remember Senator Scott and I had a little to-do about the EDD degree for education, which is now the purview of the CSUs rather than the UCs. Now, I would think that there's going to be other opportunities for us to talk about, I would say, degree switch or degree movement in the system. But I do believe that the master plan has served well. There have been fewer fights among the institutions regarding who's giving what kinds of degrees. And if we open the door to the community colleges granting degrees, even though I do have a bill, too, that talks about early education and the matriculation of, a profession that I'd like to develop and even substitute or perhaps think about the community colleges granting a BA degree in early education. That's something I think that we need to really vet out, because I'm not so sure it's appropriate for every instance. Anyway, moving on. I also think, and you mentioned on page 3 of your draft, down the paragraphs here, the first instance of mentioning student-centered approach. If we do anything, I think student-centered approach ought to be one of our first items. This revision needs to talk about kids, students matriculating through the system, rather than piling down someplace in the discussion. Mm-hmm. And also we need to really articulate statewide goals, which we haven't done. The master plan served as a blueprint, so to speak, of what the institutions were doing, not so much what kind of goals the state needs to achieve in order to move forward. And the PPIC, I think, has forced us to look at the number of educated folks that we need to have going forward, and I think that we need to include articulating some statewide goals that include a student-centered approach. Because if you're going to, we have these issues today about changing policies, and have the stakeholders all come with their armor on, and it's very difficult to make change when they're fighting over issues, small issues, I think, and I think the state, we owe it to the state to have a policy that puts our kids first and better articulates what they need to do in order to get BA degrees. The other things that, which I found intriguing in our discussion was establishing a policy body for higher education. So what is the role of CPAC? Do we need something beyond CPAC? Something that informs us as to what the federal government and statewide trends are doing? Somebody that can hold some of our policies accountable for as weighing against our goals and holding our institutions accountable? The need for transparency, which is identified. The PPIC talked about efficiency goals. This is digging down deep into some of the issues, I think, in this revision of the master plan we need to think about. The other thing that the PPIC talked about was revising the eligibility criteria in order to meet the 1 million higher ed, the workforce for higher ed in our future. And, it seems to be small tweaks because I think, according to the paper, we're already moving in that direction. We're just not paying for it. And it also talks about, the need in the revision. The revision of the master plan talks about the role of remediation. Transfer, as we all agreed on. I thought we had a aha moment when, CSU came and Scott was here. The trustee from the CSU came and talked about the AA degree as being the automatic transfer for the CSU. I thought, we've been fighting about articulations. Faculty's been fighting about articulation, and we've been trying to encourage them to do this for over 30 years or 50 years, and it's just never been done. But I just thought that was an aha movement, and I know Senator Padilla has a bill in that respect, and, how did you get out in front of that? But anyways, I thought that was something that really, something that needs to be legislated and approved of. And I guess the most difficult part, and Senator Negrete McLeod really talked about it, was the financing of this. The PPIC talked about $1.6 billion increased cost for higher education. That's, I think that's a modest goal, but I think we need to, it is our responsibility to set priorities and to weigh this very carefully and say, we're going to do this or not do this, and make sure that the public knows that what we're investing in. And I would be supportive, of course, of trying to find ways to make that happen, because it's not about me, it's about the young people, and it's about investing in our future. So with that, I'm happy to pass on.
Can I, if I might, though,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you some questions just to understand,
Sure.
so that we can, just for the process. So the way the document now reads is, and one of the ways in which we constructed this was so people could relate back to the hearings. With the exception of the overarching policy need, all the others, for the purposes of this draft, we placed into the same subject matter of each hearing.
Okay.
So people could relate back to the hearing if they chose to look at their notes. It wasn't organized with an eye toward priorities. It was organized with an eye toward members being able to go back to their notes if they wish to think about each hearing.
I hear you. But I think that.
Yeah.
Good morning. I think that going forward, I really do think the revision of the master plan ought to talk about students,
Right.
and what we need to accomplish in order to meet the future, and less so about how the institutions do or don't get us to where we need to go.
Now, the first overarching policy need, the way it's articulated in this draft, it does mention clear, concise statewide goals for the first time. I was not certain whether in this stage we should articulate the goals in this stage for this document specifically, or address that as a next stage to articulate the
Well,
goals.
I'm not clear about how I feel about that either. I don't know whether or not, if we establish a commission or, whatever you want to call it, on higher education, or whether or not that's CPAC's role or whose role it is. Is it their role? Is it our role? I mean, whose role is it to articulate statewide goals? Except that if we're responsible for the finance of it, so perhaps it's better that we do it. I don't know if we can, some states have just a very simple statement, just a sentence. It's like a mission statement as opposed to getting down into the
And the
detail.
committee may not want to go in this direction, but what was done in this draft was to, for example, to state the need for a system that articulated the statewide goals. In the draft document, it doesn't say who does that.
Correct.
And then it also stated the need for a coordinating body. The document doesn't state who that coordinating body was. I thought that perhaps we might want to pass a 50,000-foot level or agree to a 50,000-foot level approach and then begin determining more specifics. So, like your input on that, I was trying to work it in a way that we could reach consensus in steps. And at any rate, so that was the methodology for the draft document.
And just let me one final kind of thing. On page 3, it says our need to close the achievement gap. I'm not so sure that's a role of higher education. Achievement gap meaning what? Are you talking about accessibility to higher education? Achievement gap, for me, because not every institution has an English measure or a science measure. Higher education is, we let the institutions create their own schools, whatever they're self-determining as to what they think is applicable to what their students need. So when you talk about achievement gap, I can see that in the K-12 system, comparing first graders against first graders across the state. But are we comparing kids from the freshman class at UC Berkeley, comparing them with the freshman class at CSU's? I mean, what are we talking about?
And actually, I could have articulated that better. What I was referring to was drawing off the testimony of the Dr. Dowell Myers, Professor Myers from USC, the demographer, who stated the need to make up for the baby boomers who are going to be retiring, and that in order to do that, the only way we can do that is to better serve traditionally underrepresented and disadvantaged communities, and to help them better matriculate to go through the universities toward degrees. And that statement was made in regard to that item, that achievement gap, and I could have done a better job of articulating precisely what I meant in that regard, but that was where we were headed with that.
Okay. That was my observations and comments.
Mr. Block.
Thank you, Mr. Ruskin, and I want to add, my thanks to the rest of the committee's thanks for the work you and Senator Negretti McLeod have done sharing this committee. Brief statements regarding the draft policy. In terms of overarching policy, I think a real debate that we've had in here, a very healthy debate, is the role of the master plan, and it's on a continuum, whether it is something that is set in stone or something that is due for wholesale overhaul. And I think we have pretty much consensus that neither extreme is the case, that it is a document that deserves attention, deserves amendment. I mean, our U.S. Constitution has probably been more amended than the Master Plan for Higher Education. I don't think we need to reject change just because it is a change in the Master Plan. Having said that, it has served us well for many years, and I think we need to be careful with any changes. With regard to access, and I'm going down the document. Important, I think the PPIC report told us we need to be able to build capacity, and yet we need to do it without damaging the quality of the education. And that's a tough balance sometimes. And each of these each of the categories ties into the others. So when you go down the document, you get to financial aid and affordability. I think we need to do a much better job of making sure that all of our students know what financial aid opportunities are available to them, that their parents or they themselves, depending on their age and their status, have assistance in completing financial aid documents. I know as someone who's been in higher education for many years, we have scholarships, we have financial aid that just goes untapped, and yet we have students with great need and students working 20 to 40 hours a week. We need to do a better job of matching the aid that's available to the students in need. Moving on, in terms of accountability, one category is need for increased transparency. I have a bill, actually AB 2402, that calls for greater transparency when a CSU campus makes a decision that affects the admission of local students. That is a decision in terms of admission criteria. When there's a change in criteria by a public university, I think the process needs to be publicly aired. So that bill, which is working its way through the system, calls for the CSU to bring broad changes in admission criteria before local school boards and community college boards, some of the stakeholders, people, so they can give input into potential changes in admission criteria and also be aware, be informed of the criteria. In terms of completion rates, which is another subtopic under accountability, Connie Conway, the Assembly member, had I think a bill going in the right direction, talking about funding based on completion rates as opposed to just attendance. But that bill at this time hadn't had the buy-in of enough stakeholders, and I think that the concept of funding completion rates needs to be discussed with faculty and students and staff and other stakeholders. In terms of the achievement gap, I take the achievement gap as it relates to higher education to mean to tie into completion rates, because I think we find both at the community college level and at the university level, more folks are getting their degrees and successfully completing more Anglo and Asian students than Latino and African American students, and that gap is that we need to assure that those who begin college meet their goals regardless of race, socioeconomic status, etc. And the colleges need to do a better job in doing that. CSU has undertaken a program to increase its completion rates, but we need to be careful that when we do that, we don't increase completion rates by cutting down access and being more selective in the student body. That's a discussion that CFA and the CSU had at a recent hearing that I thought was very productive. Moving along, coordination, articulation. CPAC historically has done an outstanding job in California, but they've seen their funding decimated over the last several years. And while they continue to do a very good job with what they have, we either have to fully fund CPAC or we have to find another means of coordinating what the different segments in higher education are doing. Moving on to the last page of the report. We talk about relating to financing. I think we need to be much more efficient in higher education. When we talk about competition between higher education, healthcare, senior services, other important services for the tax dollars, I always support higher education because that's my background. I think that's an investment in the future. But I've had people come into my office in the health field working for community clinics, and they'll say on a Friday afternoon, you can walk through almost any campus in the state and not see anybody. On Saturday and Sunday, you don't see many people. The community clinics are jammed on Friday afternoons and jammed on Saturdays. We need to get better use out of our facilities. We need summer sessions. We need year-round, and summer sessions that are more than just 10% of the regular session. We need to use our facilities more effectively. And it's been mentioned, and Senator Padilla's bill has been mentioned, we need to increase transfer rates. Just as one example of something that ties some of these concepts together, Assemblymember Cook mentioned a bill I had that was scheduled to be up today in higher ed to allow community colleges in a pilot program to offer 4-year degrees in a few critical workforce need areas. Now, I'm not going to actually have that bill heard today because it needs more airing out. It needs more input from faculty and students and staff and workforce folks. I think it can't be a kind of a top-down kind of approach. It needs to be further studied. But I'm committed to running that bill again next year because I think it affects several of the issues we talked about here. It will make higher education more accessible, particularly in parts of the state that don't have 4-year universities. It would, I think, increase transfer rates. When students can finish a 4-year degree at the same institution where they've done their first 2 years, if it's a community college where they feel comfortable, where they know the faculty, where they know their classmates, that's physically, geographically proximate to their home, I think they're more likely to continue. I think we see transfer rates increasing greatly. So the idea of allowing community colleges to offer a 4-year degree in a limited set of areas, I would agree with again, Assemblyman Cook, is something to look at. And that's critical to the discussion of the master plan because some folks say, without any discussion, we can't do that. That violates the master plan. It's mission creep. And as a friend of mine says, the only thing that's creepy is denying access to higher education to our students. So we've seen the CSU already take on EDD degrees and moving toward PT degrees, doctoral degrees. I think there is a need, when we examine the master plan, to be flexible and be willing to look at change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Thank you, Senator Wright.
Okay, I think, I want to echo what's already been said just about the work of the committee. I think we probably do a couple of things. I'm probably the contrarian a bit, in that in many cases we had people that we kind of steered to college who didn't really want to go and probably should have never gone. And we invested a lot of people, again, in Trade Tech College in Los Angeles, 35% of people have a bachelor's degree, would suggest that many of them should have never gone to the 4-year school in the first place. And their reasons for going were unclear in many instances. In many of the discussions that we have that talk about the need for bachelor's degrees, that's actually not true. The need is for specialized degrees. It's not a bachelor's degree in Russian literature. I mean, we don't need a 40% increase in Russian literature bachelor's degrees. We need nurses. We need engineers. We need math teachers. But we don't need a whole lot of experts in black studies. It's not to say that those are subjects that ought to be taken away, but it's to say if you simply assume that someone needs a bachelor's degree, then you'll get the bachelor's degree in whatever it is, find out that you can't get a job. I think one of the things that became a problem that I've seen with higher education in California over the years is that, again, I just look at, if you go to law school, to me that's no different than going to plumbing school. Now, we call them professionals and we call them elite if you're a doctor or you're a lawyer. No, you're not. That's just the vocation that you chose. And it doesn't make you better than the guy who chose to be an electrician. And the more we do that, the more we create disincentives. And particularly in many of the trades that you look at now, you're not finding enough people to come in and do much of the work that needs to be done, whether or not it's fix roads. I mean, I thought it was atrocious several years ago that a freeway collapsed in Los Angeles, and the people who repaired it came from Arkansas. That should have said something to us, that why do we have to go to Arkansas to bring in people, house them at a nice hotel for 6 months so that they could repair a freeway in Los Angeles County? On its face, that should have just bothered a lot of people. In my district, the school district is spending $10 billion replacing schools. Oftentimes, those schools are in neighborhoods where the relative unemployment rate is north of 30%. the school district didn't train the people who live in those neighborhoods to do the construction work in their own neighborhood. So I'm watching people come from way out of their area to build schools, and they're driving by all these unemployed people who should have been trained in their school to do that work. So I think that we need to focus it. I think I would even look at higher ed as another element. Is it's not simply a degree, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we fund all of the degrees or subsidize them all at the same rate. So we might decide, for example, that math teachers are important and that there is a need to create them, and we'll subsidize that. We might decide that science teachers are important or nurses are important, and we'll subsidize that at a higher level than you would other majors where there's the taking of the degree is purely esoteric. It's not to say that you say, oh, okay, math is or music is unimportant. Clearly it is. But having the particular skills that you want, and the outcomes in college, I think, becomes important. We've kind of sort of said to college, you just train people in whatever you want. We don't care what it is. Just if they got a bachelor's degree, then we're satisfied that they got it. I think that in this new competitive world, it's going to be more complicated than that. And we're going to have to begin looking at specifically what we do for folk. And I think that at the end, people will need options. I know we're, kind of sort of turning that corner now. But for the majority of people who are not going to go to college, there still needs to be a plan for them as well. Yeah. And that whatever that might be, but we shouldn't say, or we shouldn't imply to young people, if you didn't go to college, you somehow failed. Because what we're saying is that the majority of our young people who aren't going to school, to college, that you failed. We should have avenues where young people are able to do that. And I think, finally, from a community like I represent, many of my people don't go to college out of high school. For a variety of reasons, some of them go work for a year, 2, 3 years, and then return to college. What we find is that their graduation rates are better because when they came back, they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and it was focused. I think, the president at Long Beach State does a form where he does something that many of the other colleges resist. In fact, the CSU Faculty Senate rejected the idea. I think it ought to be mandated that you produce a form that says if you go to this college and you take this major, this is what your expected income is going to be. Because again, in my district, nobody went to college because they thought it was cool. Everybody went to college because they thought that it would help them earn more money. And to the extent that colleges want to distance themselves from the fact that people went there to get a better job. That's why you went. I mean, there are some people who might just say, I really want to be a lawyer so that I can help people, but I'm really not interested in the pay. God bless those people, and there are probably not enough of them. Most people who suffered through law school and pay for it did so because they hoped that there was a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. And I don't care what community you're from, having that information becomes important. At Long Beach State, the president told me, he said, that is the document most read by the parents who are sending kids to his school, because in some instances it tells the young person, this is how much money you can make, and it clarifies in many instances why they're there. I think we want to make sure that our master plan covers those things that we need going forward. And it's not just a bachelor's degree, but there's specific subject areas. Engineering, information technology, computer engineering, those things that actually are going to be in demand. We want to make sure we have those. We should survey companies in California and say, what are you having trouble finding? If Microsoft is importing computer engineers from India, that should be a concern as to why are we not training more computer engineers. If hospitals in Los Angeles are importing nurses from the Philippines, that should be an indication to say, why are we not training more nurses here? In some instances, they're taking nurses from South Africa into California. Something's wrong if we're going all the way to Pretoria, South Africa, to recruit nurses, just on its face. And as you know, I think we've given much of higher education a blank check and just said, go educate people. I think we have to look at educate them in what, for what, and to what.
Thank you. Let me ask you some questions so I can understand.
I know it was a rambling. I apologize.
No. Well, one of the things that we did in the draft, for example, to try to address, not to try to address, but to address some of these items that you brought up. For example, there's a paragraph in the draft that says on page 4, and I'm sorry that the last page, I'm sorry your copies are not numbered. Public copies are. At the top, there's a page that says this partnership. We're trying to, we're not dealing with specifically K to 12, so I was wanting to address this issue in terms of how higher ed could help implement it. The paragraph says, for example, this partnership between K-12 and higher education should include advancement of rigorous career technical education in both K-12 and community colleges so that students who do not choose to seek a four-year degree may have the benefits of productive careers, helping eliminate the stigma often attached to those not seeking a four-year degree or graduate study. I did not, we didn't go into details about the specific goals of careers, but the draft does talk about establishing for the first time clear, concise, statewide goals for California education. Those goals could, of course, include specific accountability for. Once you establish goals, you can then establish accountability, and those goals can include the workforce needs by specific categories. So it was a question of how much to drill down into detail in this particular document, and that's where I need some feedback from committee.
I would say on the higher education side, the thing to remember is, in order to be a high school or junior high school teacher, you still have to have a teaching credential, thus a bachelor's degree, and a year after the bachelor's degree. One of the real challenges that we now have at the K-12 level is that many of the CSUs, the UCs never wanted to do it, never did in the first place, but most of the voc ed teachers come from the CSU, and the CSU is beginning to shift away from, I mean, we used to, in a pejorative almost called it UC light. In terms of trying to chase the UC, they're moving away from that mission of not only training teachers, but making sure that we're keeping teachers in the vocational side. So if I've got a 20-year journeyman plumber, he can't teach plumbing in a high school. So I need to have plumbers who are also teachers who can begin teaching in high school. And that becomes a mission, again, of higher ed, so that teachers know that if I'm a plumbing teacher or an electrical teacher or a computer-aided drafting teacher, that those majors are going to be considered by the UC and taught. Because I'll tell you, most all of the people who do that will get a job, because there's a critical shortage of trained teachers in the vocational arts. So I think the higher education element to that would be to make sure that the CSU maintains the responsibility of training teachers across the spectrum, not just in math and science, but in addition to the vocational arts. And in many cases, they'll be the same, but particularly those teachers who do that. That's a recent phenomenon, by the way, because it was not always the case. I think it was the last 10 years that we've made that requirement. So, but yeah, I appreciate that element being there, because I think that an ultimate higher education plan should include that paragraph that you read from that talks about vocational ed and the stigma and the other things you raised. I couldn't have written it better myself.
Thank you, Senator Padilla.
good, I think, good discussion, and appreciate the way you have laid out sort of the key themes on the draft document that reflect the organizational structure of the series of hearings that we've had. So I won't be repetitive. All the major points are hit: access, financial aid, accountability, et cetera. But obviously, I've tried to focus and stay focused for the last few years on this coordination and articulation piece because of the transfer.
No, the transfer is included in it.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to call that out and say how much I appreciate it, how much I thank you for it, and how much I value the aha moment that we had, as Senator Liu put it, which not only has, I think, inspired me and the other stakeholders involved around my bill to be a little bit more aggressive, but as a result, actually, I think garner more support for taking the significant step on the transfer piece, and in an unintended way, actually do so in a manner that's going to achieve efficiencies for the system. And achieving efficiencies, using that terminology sometimes make eyes glaze over, but what we're talking about is saving money for the state of California if the community college system and the CSU system can literally function more efficiently and move students through on a quicker pace, but also is going to save students and families money because they're going to be able to finish on a more timely basis and therefore save the tuition money, the book money, the time that it is currently taking. So I'm heartened to see that. I'm heartened to see the bill moving forward. I know several of you have reached out to me to come on as co-authors and that sort of thing for the bill. So when it comes by way of the floor for a vote in the Senate and as it works its way through the Assembly, I'd hope to enjoy the same support as well.
Thank you. And this might be a good time to talk about some process issues as they relate to this.
Do I get to talk?
Yes, you do.
And Mr. Portantino,
Oh, no.
thank you.
No,
Before we
I'm sorry. I'm not.
get off
We're
into
going to
that
go
lane,
all the way
okay.
down and keep talking as long as people want to talk. But I thought the committee might wish to know, since Senator Padilla mentioned his bill and Mr. Block, Assemblymember Block, mentioned his bill, and I know other people have bills, just to let you know, given the structure of this committee, what the committee can and can't do regarding bills. So, given the structure of this committee as a joint committee of both houses, and had a lengthy conversation with various people, including Dotson Wilson, to understand this, the committee cannot, as a committee, author bills. And the committee cannot, as a committee, support specific bills. What we can do is, for example, in a couple of ways, either as a vote or as a signing on as a letter, members of the committee, we can support concepts. We can make recommendations to the legislature, and and that's what we're talking about in the draft document, conceptual recommendations. Individual members of the committee can choose to co-author or be principal co-authors if the author were happy with that, to support bills in that way. There are also, I know that there are spot bills waiting for action should the committee, for example, adopt, and hopefully you all will reach consensus, let's say on a needs-based assessment, for which this is a draft document, that could be dropped into a bill, which cannot be a committee bill, but committee members can co-author that bill, but it must be authored by specific authors. So the committee can make its voice known, its recommendations known, but it cannot specifically endorse bills as a committee, nor can it author bills as a committee. But I think its influence, the committee's influence, nevertheless, can be quite strong and quite distinct, as I think already we are seeing. So I just wanted to, in case people were wondering about that, I wanted to make that clear. Senator Hancock.
Excuse me, Assemblymember.
Yes.
Just to respond to Senator Padilla's presentation, the PPIC report suggests that both UCs and CSUs increase their share of transfers. And I would hope that we would make that a consideration, because I think there's more success for a student who's already completed 2 years to move on, and that completion rate is higher than somebody starting out as a freshman. So, I mean, it just makes sense that whatever we do in this revision of the master plan, that I think that concept is really important.
In the draft
Thank you.
document, it talks about that, including advancing the concept of a transfer associate degree.
And that's actually building on current success. Studies show that the students who transfer from community college to the 4 years, on the whole, do better than their counterparts who went straight to the 4 years out of high school. So it does make a lot of sense.
Thank you. Is that what you were referring to, Senator Liu? I wanted to be sure I understood this.
If I would add anything to that, it's not so much from a programmatic standpoint or requirement standpoint, but from a capacity standpoint. How are the UCs and CSUs positioned to receive more students if we do a better job of both the transfer piece and increasing the raw numbers of students graduating or transferring from the 2 years to the 4 years, combined with doing a better job, we hope, on the K-12 side of things and graduating more students out of high school. You know, with X number of students going on to our 4 years today, both directly from high school or transferring, if we up those numbers by 10%, 15%, do we have the physical capacity in our university system to handle that increased student population?
You're asking that question.
Yes.
That's an important question. All right, I understand. Okay, thank you. Senator Hancock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment on Senator Padilla's last comment, it might be that if we didn't have such a large percentage of our students in higher ed having to do remedial coursework, that we would free up both classrooms and teaching time for other things. But I have, having looked at the draft, and want to thank you guys very much, the chairs, for the very excellent way this was put together, and also the staff, who I think did a wonderful job. I did have about 6 comments. I'll make them almost as a list. I'm assuming then we'll see how we get a program together. I think it is very important that we reaffirm the mission statement of the original master plan, that there is universal access for every qualified student for a high-quality education at low cost. That was the great egalitarian, hopeful statement of that plan, and that we need to recommit ourselves to it, no ifs, ands, or buts. Having done that, there are a series of things we need to do to update the plan. Let me just say, I was unclear what it means to say we have no goals, set goals, because I thought the mission statement, as Senator Liu referred to it, is very clearly goals, and I'm a little leery about how much we can really target in on goals. You know, 25 more public accountants next year, or that's a little circumscribed. But how about how many millions of teachers we may need? And then, for example, since CSU is the major component of educating, not training, educating teachers, how do we ensure that we get thoughtful, thoroughly well-educated people also understanding the psychology of young people, et cetera, to be our teachers? Things like the STEM, science, engineering, math, et cetera. Those courses we're going to need. But I don't think, I think our goal actually is educated people who can not only, who can create knowledge and understand how it fits into the culture of the world, is our mission. But there were a number of things that we can clearly do. I think the most important, and perhaps, the most important and low-hanging fruit, if you will, is the articulation. And I'm really delighted that Senator Padilla has a bill to do that. I think it can really lead to increased efficiency with higher quality. We have to deal with the financial aid issues. And those I don't think we necessarily have a philosophical consensus on, but we really need to talk about what is a fair cost for a family to pay, what should the state be paying, and how do we feel about various forms of privatization in which the private sector comes in and contributes. Do we want to have it a percentage of family income? Or do we want something more like Social Security or Medicare that really is available to everyone at a modest cost? So we need to continue that discussion. Completion is a real issue. It probably has to do with support services a lot. Also, as Assemblyman Block stated, you don't want to cut off access, and you don't want to cut down on quality.
Right.
You can have a lot of completion if you have grade creep. So how do we work on those issues? And I thought the achievement gap questions were quite interesting, actually. I know that UC Berkeley has done a fabulous job, for example, reaching down into the public schools of our area, volunteering, making sure that college awareness and college preparation are part of the world of young people. And I hope that we can build on that. I believe there was once a community service, perhaps still is, component required of use of University of California graduates, that they had to do some community service. It's always something to remind people of. You've got to reach down and give back. And I would also like to see the UCs and CSUs not only more supportive of career technical education, but looking at the A to F requirements, working more actively and positively with high schools and courses of studies to make sure that students that do this, who decide they want to go on, will be UC eligible. And finally, we do have to talk about state support for higher education. If this is a zero-sum game, we have X number of spaces in our higher ed system, and I don't think we're going to be giving community college BAs anytime soon, because then we won't have anybody to transfer to our other segments. Are we going to try to expand with our expanding population? Do we want the percentage of state support to be what it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago? Or are we content to have what the dean of Boalt Law School called a publicly encouraged university, not a publicly supported university? And I think we ought to cost out what it would take, and then we ought to talk seriously with the people of California about whether we want to undertake it for our kids. So with all of those things, I think you laid it out. I think we should try to ensure that bills are introduced if they already haven't been in these topic areas. But I think we also have a lot more just serious discussion about what we expect of ourselves.
Just to clarify, Senator Hancock, so what, for example, would be your wish as to this, let's say we hopefully reach consensus on a needs document, what the needs are. Would you, as one member of the committee, wish to see the needs document drill down into more detail itself, or would you rather have, which was the direction the committee was going, perhaps a second effort, a second-tier effort of effort to drill down into specifics?
I think we should identify the areas in which there is now legislation moving forward, so people who might want to co-author or be supportive of legislation can be, and we should identify the areas where we have more work to do and set forward a work plan to get there.
All right. And what about the an initial statement? Do you think that needs to wait upon additional work, or do you think we can do a first-tier statement?
You should see a need for a statement.
Well, I think a brief committee report stating consensus, if we have one.
Right. I'm trying to. That's one of the things I'm trying to discern as we're talking. Is where is the consensus? And I will endeavor to do that after this meeting.
I think you have to put something on the table for us to comment on.
I'm sorry.
I think you have to put something on the table for us to comment on.
A second
Right.
draft. Right.
Yeah, if staff could distill all the comments and do a redraft,
Right.
it might make sense to look at that.
Right, and
I
I
thought you laid out the issues actually very well, and the question is just how we prioritize them and shape them,
Right.
and what the plan is to move forward.
Okay. And probably, I think one of the ways in which that'll work well is for me to have conversations as well. So, Assemblyman Portantino.
Thank you, Mr. Ruskin and Ms. Negrini McLeod for chairing this effort, and I think it's been a very, very worthwhile, positive undertaking. I think you've done a very good job in laying out the sort of the broad aspects of all the hearings. A couple things to play off. I agree with Ms. Hancock when we talked about the financing and the commitment to the master plan to higher education. And I think one area that I'd like to see beefed up a little bit is sort of the connection between the financing of the master plan or educating our children and the economic benefit of doing so. So as we make the case to fully fund the master plan going forward, I think it's important to point out what the benefits are from an economic perspective and talk about some of the current deficiencies, the 17,000 doctors we need, the 40 allied health professions, that talk about the overall job market and how we can benefit the overall economy by having a broader tax base and an educated workforce. So if we could work on that aspect, I think that would be a very positive thing as we make the case to fully fund it. And I think Senator Hancock is right. You go out and you say, this is what we want to do, public, and we want to have a dedicated revenue stream, and here's why it's in everyone's best interest. So I think if we make that case, I think it becomes a powerful document. As far as the goals and objectives, many of us know that Chancellor Scott, when he was here, worked for a number of years on a bill that laid out a framework for goals and objectives and accountability measures for the three segments and had tremendous input of the three segments. That bill is now AB 218, which has gone through all the policy committees and is over in the Senate side and working on one aspect of it, hopefully that the governor's office will sign it this year. It's my bill, but it started with Senator Scott when he was here, and he worked on it for 2 years in close coordination with the segments, and would love to have members of the committee come on as co-author and be part of it, because Chancellor Scott worked for 2 years, and the segments all, I see Karen nodding her head, the segments all had tremendous input in creating that framework for that bill, and so I'd like to see that come to pass, and I know so would now Chancellor Scott, after working so long and hard. And it was the penalty piece that was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't the academic or the framework piece that anybody had any disagreement on. It was the penalty piece. So hopefully we can work that out with the governor's office and get a signature on it this year, and not let another year go by where we don't have goals and accountability. Another area that I think needs to be touched upon is the role, as we talk about articulation and we talk about, in the end, preparing our students for success, the role of concurrent enrollment in the master plan and how that would work with the transition from our high school students into community college. And I'd like to see some time and care given to the role of concurrent enrollment in the master plan, and I think we can do that. Otherwise, I think you've laid out the major points quite nicely, and I think this has been a very healthy, good process. Unless we're at the end of the day willing to commit to it, I think the comments are well taken. We've got to do better by our students because it's just in all of our collective best interest to do that. And I look forward to seeing the final document.
And thank you also, Assemblyman Portantino, for the work you did in launching this committee, helping to do that. I appreciate it.
Well, listening to everybody as I'm taking notes, it's pretty much what the draft here is, and it's pretty much what was said at every single committee meeting that we had. Articulation, accountability, transparency, the commitment of the legislature to fund higher education. The only thing, what we do and what happens out in the public, while the public agrees that education is the way to go to better jobs, to a better quality of life, et cetera, however, not everybody is committed to putting the resources to that end. I don't know, in my district, when everybody is suffering in my district, unemployment is at 14.9%. People don't really care right now about education. It's about how am I going to live. So unless that we as a legislature can articulate the need for the public's commitment to this, then we're just kind of spinning our wheels. We can talk loftily about everything that's on the draft, everything that we heard, everything that everybody told us, but unless the public is willing to agree with us, then it's all for naught.
Are there any additional comments? I know there are other members who I think are planning to arrive a little later, but any other thoughts that members want to impart?
Just what's the process going forward?
Well, I'm trying to discern that now. I think...
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Now, this is very public. This is stuff. I really would like to have a closed meeting with the members.
I don't think we can do that.
We can't do that. All right, then we can't. Never mind. Never mind.
But there probably can be various people going out to dinner.
Okay.
Fortunately, we're all still social beings.
We cannot. All our meetings must be public.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But I understand what Gloria was saying.
Yeah.
She wants to have a
I think
little
the
informal
process is,
discussion.
here's the process is, I'm suggesting it, give me your feedback. My staff and I need to digest what has been said. I know staff has taken copious notes. I have as well. And we will look toward adjusting the draft to incorporate what has been said. What is not always clear is whether what one person or another says will receive buy-in from all other members. I know that we've avoided argumentation today. No one member has disputed what another member has said, which is good in terms of promoting goodwill amongst the members and understanding that we may have different views, but at some point that'll have to be worked out. So I think I will, with my co-chair, work toward a second draft that incorporates what has been said. If I have any questions about items, or Senator McLeod does, we will call you to clarify any points that you've made, and then come up with another draft, and then we can circulate. Well,
we could have another meeting.
We can have another meeting and put that draft in. And Senator Hancock, for example, you've made suggestions about the need to continue discussion on specific items, especially what's the fair cost for the family to pay or the student to pay. How do we feel about what is the social compact going to be between the public good and the private benefit of this? The draft document articulates the need to arrive at that. The question is, do we arrive at that? Do we explore that and arrive at that before we put out a document, or do we explore and arrive at that as a second-tier task? That I'm not certain of at this point.
Well, I think some things are easier to arrive at than others.
Right.
I mean, I really just appreciate what both of you have done on this. I think it's remarkable, and it's the kind of focused discussions we need to be having. But I would like to see a ringing reaffirmation of the mission. I mean, it made California great, and we need to say that we want to continue that.
And that's a good point, because even though it is implicit in the document, the reaffirmation is implicit in the document, it can certainly be done in a way that is much more ringing, as you say, and much clearer.
And then I do think that there are some things that are being worked on now, like articulation.
Right.
And that we should note those and prioritize those extremely highly, because we can do them now. And then really lay out the other topics as work that needs to be done. We could have a whole hearing or series of hearings, really, on the financial aid piece.
Right.
And the financial support of the state for higher education, and we probably need that. But I think it would be good if we have fleshed out the vision first, because talking to the public, as Senator McLeod said, absolutely critical. We need, if you will, a narrative of what higher education does for a community of people. We have built these great public structures over decades, and they're in danger of crumbling. How do we communicate that to the people of California so they can make informed choices? That's a whole other component, but I think we should add that into the work plan.
So are you saying then, Senator, just so I'm clear about what you're saying, is that you see it as a worthwhile goal to do this in tiers, to adjust this document to incorporate the commentary of every member today, so much as that's possible, and then to outline a work plan for further work that we might endorse a document and then continue working to flesh it out further? Is that what you're saying?
I think that would be good, and,
Okay.
and I think it should result in action.
Right.
Legislation.
And I agree. I'm just trying to get the sense of the committee. I think what I would like to see, and I think my co-chair, although I won't speak for her right now because she's right here, but
You put your hand like that.
but I think that let us now work toward incorporating those statements that were made today that fit into a high-level needs document. Work on reshaping the document so it is perhaps less according to the hearing plan that we did, and more according to a public document with priorities, and then indicating the work plan for additional documents we might endorse that drill down into how we meet certain needs. So we'll take a shot at this and continue working and consulting with all of you. Does that ring true?
Sounds good.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Mr. Co-Chair, I think that for the long term is better, but I think on the short term that we should all get on board, if that's what we wish, to the bills that Mr. Portantino and Mr. Padilla have, so that we have a short-term goal and we have a long-term goal.
Obviously, every member of this committee is free as a result of your own thinking and what has come out of this committee to sign on to vehicles that express some of the items embodied in this and what we've said today. The committee cannot do that as a whole, I've learned. But members can certainly come from this committee. And also, I should say that there is another transfer bill that is out too, originating in the Assembly by Assembly Member Fong, also dealing with transfer. I'm sorry? And Assembly Member Blakesley also has a bill dealing with transfer.
Could bring them the next time that we get together.
All right.
Yeah.
And actually, we have a draft document, a chart, showing the differences and similarities between all those bills. We'll polish that chart up and we can send it to you.
Yes, yes. We're
All right.
losing our people, so
Well, I think at this point we'll have public comment if anyone wishes to make public comment.
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Karen Zamaripa with the California State University. And first, I do want to thank the committee members and your staff for what I think has been an extraordinary process. I have to admit that personally I was a bit skeptical, but I think it's been outstanding with your leadership, Ms. Negretti McLeod, and also a public acknowledgement for Senator Vasconcellos, who has always had the passion for keeping us all true to what we're trying to do here for students and the state.
Senator Vasconcellos is here today, gracing us with his presence. Good to see you.
Yes. I just want to share a few comments. I don't want to get too specific about bills, although I have one biased one that I will talk about. I just want to reiterate the importance of what you've all discussed here just recently about how we work together to convince the public of California of the value added of these great institutions. I think that we struggle with a belief that going to college is a personal benefit, whereas I believe truly in my heart that it is a public good that people don't fully appreciate or understand. And we've done our best at CSU to try to convey that with economic impact reports. I think the work that PPIC is doing is trying to do that. But to the extent that we can find a way to take that to the people, to work together in making that case and helping educate them, I would hope over time we could get them to reinvest, as you have referenced, Senator Negretti McLeod, in a way that I think in their hearts they want to, they just don't fully appreciate what the value add is to them if their kids aren't in college or they've already finished. And I think we could do a lot together in that regard. It's also true that all of this is an extraordinary vision that needs to be funded. It is true that all of us need to find ways to better serve students, to be more efficient and effective. That means that we have to change all of our thoughts about what that means, whether it's faculty, staff, or the students themselves as it relates to the expectations. But we really aren't going to be able to deliver on this unless we can get the kinds of resources that we all know we need in order to provide access, affordability, and quality. As you look at issues dealing with those three, I just want to emphasize that we can't disconnect the three components that really reflect the financing of higher education in California. That's financial aid, that's state general fund, and that's student fees. And I would urge you to closely link those three and not disconnect them from one to another. And the example is a fee policy. When I first started at the CSU, we had a fee policy that provided predictability, gradual increases, that I watched the legislature in lieu of 8 times out of 10 in the 10 years that I first worked at CSU. So making a promise to students about predictability when we know we can't promise it, I think is a false promise, and one that really requires us to work together to get a stronger state level of support for higher education coupled with a reasonable fee policy. If we had a fee policy, as some that have been proposed this year, in place in 9-10, we would have laid off 5,000 more people, or not enrolled probably tens of thousands more students, because our options are pretty limited. So we really need to link those together. As it relates to efficiency and effectiveness, I think Senator Padilla and the committee has already discussed. I think that one of the shortcomings as it relates to implementation has really been transfer. I mean, we've talked about this for so long. I'm not going to say it's older than I am, but almost. And I think that we're trying to make headway working with Senator Padilla on his proposal. And we have focused between the CSU and the community colleges, because the bulk of transfer students do come to our system, and we believe that we can get our faculty to break this barrier as it relates to having a true transfer AA degree, or an AA degree that follows a student, and the student then completes 60 units at CSU, and he or she's done with 120 units. So it's not easy, because faculty are reluctant and concerned, legitimately. But at the same time, as you've said earlier, we're trying to move from being about the adults and trying to move to be about what's best for students, and that requires all of us to kind of be out of our box and think about those changes. We would also concur with your views that we really do need to think about access as it relates to completion. Access without helping students get to their goal is really not a very honorable statement. And so we have taken on really trying to improve our own graduation rates. That does take faculty and staff to help students make that move. And again, that ties back to resources. But I think that focusing on completion, looking at achievement gap, holding the segments accountable to delivering what we're supposed to be delivering are all appropriate goals. And again, we appreciate your work, and we look forward to working with all of you as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Is it appropriate if I ask a question?
Oh, certainly.
All right.
Only if you're nice.
I'm going to be nice, but it's not going to be an easy question.
Okay.
I appreciate everything you said and agree with your framework. The one thing that I didn't hear you touch upon was one of the themes that was in the document of sunshine.
Oh.
And certainly, you know, given these trying times, it just seems to me that if the segments embraced some of the efforts of some of the legislative, I know Senator Yee and others have brought bills out to create more sunshine, more accountability through that. I think it improves the argument, and you've heard me say this before, for those of us who want to champion the resources, it's hard to do when seems like there's a pushback from the segments on some of the accountability and some of the sunshine. And so I would like you to comment on that, and hope that the CSU would embrace those efforts to bring more sunshine to the governance aspect of the colleges versus opposing those efforts. So that would be a request in the form of a question.
Okay, great. Well, Assemblymember Portantino, I love always the good opportunity. Let me start by saying that we do believe that accountability and transparency is important. As you indicated, we worked with Senator Scott, with Senator Lieu, and with you, and would still like to see AB 218 put into law. So we have some clear goals, some clear objectives, and then we have some measures of success. We're doing that internally at the CSU. We think the state should do it as well. As it relates to Senator Yee's effort, as you may or may not know, we've actually proposed amendments to Senator Yee, which we believe does strike the balance between transparency and accountability and protecting the role of our auxiliaries that are important to us as it relates to their separateness. We've not had any feedback from him to date except to have a press report that he does not accept those amendments, but I'm still trying, and I will continue to, in trying to work something that will work for both of our goals and the objectives, which ultimately are making sure that the institution can serve students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And, you know, in regard to that, I was actually, had actually written up statement that I would want to even add to the draft that we did that is more explicit, so it got to further where I was trying to go, which would be something like California needs to seek transparency in order to find the optimum equilibrium between administrative costs, teaching costs, and other expenses. So I also was working more toward that.
Thank you.
I would have Mr. Pettis.
Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none. Welcome, Mr. Perez. We've had a great discussion.
Sure.
Welcome your input on the draft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Co-Chair, rather. And first of all, let me just say thank you to both of you, co-chairs that have done some great work here, and for inviting me and being part of this working group. I think it's important. I think it's essential. And the time has come for us to really think through what the future holds when it comes to the master plan for higher education for all our constituents throughout the state of California. And I have been able to follow some of the discussion. I had my own committee hearing. I had to leave. And so I don't want to reiterate perhaps what's already been said. I definitely agree with a lot of the points made in the document. With all the points made in the document when it comes to the fact that we need statewide goals, when we talk about the issue of universal access, right? When we talk about affordability and making sure our students have access to financial aid, when we're talking about transparency, when we talk about not only the recruitment of students, especially students of color that perhaps have not had that opportunity in the past, but also the retention thereof, because that is obviously a concern. When we talk about articulation throughout our system, all the points that you've made here I think are right on. But I'd like to touch upon maybe a couple of things, if I may. And one of them has to do with the fact that ultimately, at the end of the day, this is also about how we can recover as a state when we talk about the economy. And as I've heard from different members of the business community throughout the state of California, one of their concerns is the fact that our students perhaps are not prepared to take on the jobs of the 21st century, and especially when it comes to innovation. We're having to bring in PhDs, we're having to bring in folks that have the skills from other states or perhaps from other nations. And I think that we can do better than that. I think that we ourselves as a state can create those opportunities for our own folks. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, the demographics are shifting. We already know that by the year 2025, Latinos will be the majority in the state of California. By the year 2050, Latinos will be the majority in the Southwest, and perhaps by the year 2070, people of color overall are going to be the majority in the United States. And one of the fears that I have and that others have talked about is, as the demographics are shifting, what are we really doing so that we can support folks of color to receive the skills that they need, the training, the education, so that they can take on jobs. And ultimately, if we don't think about that and if we don't work on that, then how are we going to recover as a state economically? And so we have to be very mindful of that. And I also link that to not only the economy and jobs, but I also look at that as we deal with the issue of the achievement gap, or if you want to look at it as the opportunity gap. And so for me, what's also equally as important as we move forward with the Master Plan for Higher Education is we think about it through the lens of economics and the global economy, but at the other end of that spectrum is that we also look at it from the perspective of achievement gap / opportunity gap. Now, what does that mean? Articulation is something that I think is always discussed, and even though it's discussed, we still lack. We talk about articulation from the aspect of K through 12 and the lack thereof. We talk about articulation between K through 12 and a higher education system and the lack thereof. We talk about articulation between the community college CSUs and the UCs and the lack thereof. And that's fine. We have to identify that, and we have to work on those fronts. But we also need to talk about articulation between our entire education system and the business community, because that is also lacking. And when I think about that, I also link that back to the opportunity gap, the achievement gap. Quite frankly, in my opinion, we have shifted the pendulum from one side all the way over to the other side. And I know the intent was a good intent. And I know that the reason behind it in the sense of making sure that all our students have access to A through G courses and have access to higher education is critical. And we need to make sure that we provide that type of education to all our kids, no matter where they're from and no matter their race or color. But as we moved in that direction, what ended up happening is that we somewhat put at the back burner vocational education and training. And I think that we need to have a balanced approach when we talk about education as a whole, whether it's K through 12 or higher education. So the economy, the achievement gap, opportunity gap, articulation, because when we don't do that, what ends up happening is that education no longer becomes relevant. And this hits on the opportunity gap and achievement gap for me. When that happens, then we have more dropout rates. And quite frankly, youth of color, unfortunately, and I don't want this for any ethnic group, racial group, but ultimately at the end of the day, it is youth of color that are dropping out of schools at 50% or even more. At the same time, we have more and more youth of color that are being incarcerated as opposed to going into the higher education system. It seems to me like we have a stronger pipeline, if you will, from schools to jails rather than schools to higher education. And we need to really think through that and what that really means in the future when we talk about the economy. And my other concern, which I know that folks are already working on, our Senator Alex Padilla is working on this issue and others as well, the issue of retention. We're recruiting students through great programs like EOP and great programs like MESA and Puente, which are important programs. But at the same time, we need to do our best to make sure that we retain our students and keep them educated, whether it's in the CSIS system so they can graduate, or whether it's in the CSU or UC system. Now, ultimately, in order for us to move forward, we're going to have to listen to all the interest groups that are participating within education. Obviously, we have to listen to our educators, we have to listen to our administrators, we have to listen to faculty, but I also think that we need to listen to labor and as well business. And as was said in the past, we have to do a better job of making sure that we create frameworks and structures and processes in which all these entities are at the table. But let me be clear. If we are to be student-centered, the most important voice that we can listen to out of all these entities is student voice. It's youth voice. And too often, we provide these frameworks for them, and we listen, we hear them, but perhaps we're not really listening to them, right? And moving on what their concerns and issues are. And so, although I can appreciate the experts, if you will, that are in the trenches of making sure that all our youth have access to higher education, I think the true expert, ultimately, at the end of the day, is the actual student that's going through the educational process. And so one thing that I'd like to see as we move forward with the Master Plan for Higher Education is that we actually create that type of safe space for students to interact. And another point is that I'd like to make is that we tend to see all this from two different tracks, and quite frankly, this is one track. It's not A through G courses and higher education versus vocational education training on the other side. We have to look at it from the aspect that ultimately, at the end of the day, we all need jobs. Right? And we all need the education, and we all need skills, and we all need training, and that should be the goal. And we know as well that the strongest thing that we can do for our students is prepare them so that they can take on a position, so they can have a great paying job. That way they are empowered. And if you ask folks in our communities that are struggling right now, that are really hurting, and if you ask them, what would you prefer? Would you prefer a job, or would you prefer a social welfare program? And not that I'm against social welfare programs. I know that they are also critical for our communities. But I guarantee you, 9 out of 10 times, people will say, I want a job. I want a job. I want a job because I want to take care of my family. I want a job because I want to be able to pay my bills. I want a job because I want to take my family out at least once a month somewhere to a nice dinner. Right? There's integrity in that. They are empowered through that process. And so at the end of the day, for me, all these elements are important. I appreciate the working group. I appreciate the plan that we have here. But let's make sure that as we move forward, we prioritize higher education. In the last 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, we have not prioritized higher education. We have prioritized the prison industrial complex, quite frankly. Now, not that I don't support our correctional officers and the hard work that they do, but I do have an issue when we already know that educating a child would cost us perhaps about $5,500, maybe $6,000 in the state of California through the K-12 system, when to incarcerate that child it costs us $45,000 a year. Right? I think ultimately that's an issue. We already know that we have built more prisons than we have universities in the last 10, 15 years. Right? I think there's an issue with that. Right? So let's also think about how we can be more creative and figure out how we can really deal with the achievement gap, the opportunity gap, dealing with the economy, with retention in the future by creating these opportunities for our students and making sure that we prevent them and we intervene early enough through education so that they don't end up in the prison system. So I want to thank you all, and I want to thank you, Co-Chair, for all your hard work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Assemblyman Nielsen has arrived. It's good to see you. I know you had a early obligation, and we talked about that. It's good to see you here. Did you wish to make comments on the draft that is before us? We've had a very healthy discussion this morning.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, and I was out actually in the rice fields with the wind blowing all over the place this morning in a meeting, so my apologies. But I want to thank you, and it's certainly a delight to be a part of this effort. Just a quick observation. It's sort of symptomatic of the times, but I remember in the 80s when Senator Vasconcellos and I worked together on the master plan review then, the whole process, I think, took around 6 years. That would be from the introduction of the bill that required the master plan review to the formation of the Blue Ribbon Commission, their 2 years of hearings throughout the state and their deliberations and recommendations, the formation of the Joint Committee that Senator Vasconcellos chaired, the deliberations of that committee, and then the final product and the passage of the 2 bills that implemented that the Senator and I worked together to carry. Now, under the imperatives of term limits, we do not have that luxury. And we have to compact this review into a brief 6 months or so, which then could constitute a fine-tuning, but not inconsequent. I think that this effort can be very successful. A number of observations related to our number of hearings that the chairman has presided over and planned. One of the things that was a cause of the review in the 80s, 70s, probably was dealt with in the 90s, though I was not a part of it, remedial ed, and our desire to get UC and CSU pretty much out of the business of remedial ed. And the constraints of the 1 year to accomplish that is something that's a constructive step in the right way, but I do believe here we need to encourage that further. Obviously, the major long-term issues are going to take decades to deal with. Assemblyman Paris mentioned about too many going to prison, and as longtime chairman of the Board of Prison Terms, I certainly attest that that is indeed so. But that isn't a quick fix, as in the governor's idea to just allocate money from the prisons and redirect it to higher ed. That would be a public safety and justice disaster. That can't happen in the short run. It can't happen in 5 years. But it can happen, begin to happen within 5 years, and significantly happen in 10 years. Now, all of us can debate what it takes to help our youth get their energies redirected, and I have my opinions as well, but I believe that we certainly need to concentrate our resources there and on K-12 so that there's less need to do remedial education. But all things are not bad. Some of the PPIC book that I read that we received was very encouraging to me. I do believe it's a time for us to revisit and take a look for the next 25 years the percentages that attend. The original master plan targets, it appeared based on what I've studied and heard, there were not altogether studied and learned decisions. They were kind of arbitrary, but they've served us well. But there's no question that we have a much greater need in the future. And the transition and matriculation, I think, is so very important. The funding issue is indeed problematic, and as I mentioned, related to the prisons, I do believe within 5 years we can begin to redirect money. There will be many competing other demands on that money that may be freed up in the prisons and the criminal justice system. On the other hand, I would argue that higher ed certainly should be a priority. There is no question that we need to have that. Accessibility is also important, and I've been one who has had great reservations about continually increasing our fees. In some cases, I'd argue that was a way of getting around the accountability. Whenever there had to be reductions in funding, it's just simply made up in fees. Other agencies of government do it as well as higher education. But that burden on the student is kind of problematic. Even carried a bill that would have limited CSU and UC from imposing fees many years ago. I got it through both houses, but it was killed on concurrence. UC is a very significant opponent when they don't like something. But we do have to have fees, and they are a part of the future. But I certainly do concur that higher education must be a priority. But we do have to work with our children to help them be prepared for this and to be inspired. One of the observations that I read was that the percentage of youth that go on to college is somewhat predicated by their educational accomplishments and goals of their parents. And so that tells me that one of our solutions is going to be generational, to create a generation of children who have a greater interest in higher education that they will then bequeath to their own children. And I think we can encourage that. Also, I believe that the focus here, certainly one of our recommendations must relate to getting our youth through their courses quicker. And the standardization of the course requirements at each institution, I think, needs to be significantly addressed. They can't be going to one school and be required this curriculum and going to that one for this other curriculum and not have those units be more standard and transferable. I can understand why that might be of interest to some folks, but I don't think that serves the best interest of our youth. And that's going to be sort of an acculturalization, too, to get folks to say, yes, we're going to get out of college in 4 or 5 years. I guess I speak with authority because I took 5 years. I took 5 years, though, because I was an agribusiness major, and I wanted to take economics courses and art courses that were not applicable to my major, and the only way to get them was to go longer. I'm glad I did. Those courses, maybe the economics helped me a little bit financially, but the art courses only helped me to be a better human being and have a profound interest in the arts. But the goal should be as fast as we possibly can transition through, and I think that should be one of our recommendations as well. And to facilitate that through looking at the curricula, helping to intervene earlier in youth in high school so that they're taking the proper courses to prepare them, and then move as quickly as they can through the 4-year institutions. I guess we still call them 4-year institutions. But I do think that that's going to be another important issue. The financial assistance is always important, and obviously scholarships, we're sure looking at that for our own children right now. What are the scholarship resources? I was very pleased that last year in the budget we could spare Cal Grant as much as we did. That is really critically important, and it did appear to be, in a very rough budget year last year, $42 billion in the red, a priority. I do believe that that must remain a priority. The adaptability to the new economic imperatives is also important. The global economy, the fast-packed pace of technology that now is sweeping our society does require different preparation in K through 12 as well as in the higher education. I also have articulated, and I'd like some mention of this, and Assemblyman Perez did, related to career tech education. Historically, there's kind of been an attitude that I believe is starting to change. Senator Vasconcellos and I dealt with it in the 80s, that community colleges were just a glorified high school. I remember dealing in the high levels of an administration at that time where the people looked at community colleges as that. But fortunately, I was able to dispose Governor Duke Mason to look otherwise, and that one year he gave $60 million more to the community colleges. And there was that grand year when, under the Duke Mason administration, a 30% increase in funding for UC and CSU did occur. That's kind of my dream, that we could ever get back to that. But in terms of the career tech education, I would argue again that career tech is not a competitor for the CSU and UC, but a complement. And we should be encouraging career tech individuals who can do their career tech courses wherever, private or public institutions, community colleges, and have a career-topping job. But many will aspire to improve in their chosen career or technology area and could then transition into CSU and UC to achieve that upgrading of abilities. And I'd certainly like to see us do a lot more in that area. In terms of preparing our youth, I remember in the 60s it was sort of the dual track. One was sort of the career ed track, or voc ed track it was then called, and then the others were going to go to college. I think we evolved away for a time in K-12 education, and the whole goal was everybody had to go to college. The career tech focus, I think, does properly suggest that that's not necessarily the goal of everybody, but it certainly should be the goal of the future for as many as we possibly can induce to do that. And that's something that we've had a lot of conversation about, and I do think, Madam Chair, that we should incorporate that into our future plans. In terms of financing, you know, this legislature has got to maintain the flexibility to establish its priorities. One of our greatest involved problems over decades is autopilot funding, and so I didn't like the governor's idea of redirection of prison money at some formula to higher education. But I do believe that we would hope to induce and encourage as many members of the legislature to be putting a high priority on higher education. California has historically been to the fore, and in some areas we've declined. It appears, to my somewhat surprise, in other areas we've excelled and done quite well over the last decade or so. I didn't expect to see that, but studying some of the documents we've had preparing for our committee here gives me a high degree of encouragement. Back to the financing, I, for one, will be one who does establish higher education as a priority, and again, understanding that community colleges to me is an integral partner. I do believe one of the greatest significances of the 1980s master plan was, in fact, really making the community colleges no longer the stepchildren, as I call them, but truly a full partner with CSU and UC in the tripartite system of higher education. And I think you see that how our chancellors and presidents are working together right now. I am delighted to see that as they've appeared before our committee. In years past, in my own experience, there's been more parochialism than exists now, and less desire to work together to be a united front, so to speak, for higher education in California, as opposed to I'm UC, I'm CSU, I'm community colleges. And it appears that they are all working together in a concerted manner. They certainly presented themselves as such to this committee. I think that bodes well at the leadership level, and that helps give us confidence, should give the citizens of California confidence that their children can, and the adults can have access and can transition and matriculate through the system, because the system is working together and cooperating. And again, and lastly, the master plan, it is important. I've always summarized it as a definition of the mission and the goals and the interrelationships of the 3 levels of higher education. The master plan review ought not be exploring all kinds of external agendas for this or that or the other thing for any given institution, but it should be setting the broader parameters. That is a success, and that's why the master plan from the 60s, the old Donahoe Act, has endured today. And the fine-tunings or the reviews that some of us have been a part of over the years certainly has helped keep that focus on those mission goals and interrelationships. I said in committee one time, I do not want a master plan review committee to become the business and professions committee of higher ed. The B&P committee is where all the turf battles between the professions occur. And we should not be here presiding in the legislature in any committee, the higher ed committee or any of the committees in those kind of turf wars. And to my point, it looks like the leadership of our universities and community college systems are working together in a concerted way. So though our review will be maybe a bit more cursory than could have been if we'd had more time, I think it still can be consequent in some of these points I believe that we've all made, and I expect that I'm echoing those of others who I've missed their presentations here. But I'm delighted in being a part of it, Madam Chair, and surely do look forward to the product of this committee. But not only that, the success is a product of how you monitor and stay after it. And again, I'll use my friend John Vasconcellos and I as examples. Over these years, since we devoted so much of our legislative career, John far more than mine, but I did a good 12 years on it, we didn't just walk away and forget it when we did our long review and passed the implementing legislation. Up till this very day, John Vasconcellos and I have continued to be a part of that master plan, trying to keep it on track, encouraging it, nudging it this way or that, being monitors of it and consciences, and to help update it and make it more contemporary and to meet the needs of our youth. If we as members of this committee, and that will be one of my closing encouragements when we have our final committee meeting, stay with it for the long run, folks. No matter what you do after you leave this legislature, continue your involvement in and concern for the master plan. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all. Many of you have come to most of the hearings. My co-chair had to go to committee. He missed his whole committee coming here, and I want to thank Assemblyman Nielsen for his thoughts. And he's right. Almost everybody had the same kind of train of thought, because that's what we heard from everybody. We will now endeavor to do a final draft of what we feel will be the long-term goals and the short-term goals, because there are some short-term goals and long-term goals. And unfortunately, Senator Vasconcellos and former Senator Nielsen had the opportunity to work on it long-term. They saw the inception, and they saw it grow, and it waned, and perhaps now it'll grow again with this committee, and that is our hope as a committee. Thank you. And now this committee is closed.